All right, it looks like all of our attendees are joining. Thank you for putting in the chat where you're calling from. It's great. It seems that we have some folks from as far away as Argentina and a number of folks joining us from an English class in Virginia. We're happy to have you here. Welcome to the 6th event in our series, Diversities, and the second conversation that explores the language of change in collaboration between Shared Studios and Planet Word. As part of today's Diversities event, we're bringing you experts in disinformation, storytelling, and messaging from around the world to explore the way that language is used as propaganda, how to counter these messages of disinformation, and strategies that a number of folks around the world are using to embed messages of peace and reconciliation into the media that they produce. I'm Brandon Furter. I'm the Director of Global Community for Shared Studios, and I'll be moderating today's event. And I'm joined by Rebecca Roberts, Curator of Programming for Planet Word. Rebecca, if you'd like to introduce yourself and say a little bit about Planet Word.
Yes, welcome everybody. We're delighted to have you. Planet Word is a new museum of words and language in downtown Washington, D.C. That's it in my Zoom background. It's in a historic schoolhouse downtown. I'm really looking forward to today's program. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And now let's go ahead and meet our guests. We'll begin in DC with Raquel Rosenblum, a program officer for the Information and Media Practice at IREX. On the Securing Access to Free Expression Initiative, Raquel is a focal point for program activities and curriculum work in the Middle East and North Africa. Welcome, Raquel.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Hi, everyone.
Then we're going to go from DC to Rwanda. Musagara Andre is a Musekeweya radio drama scriptwriter and director. His tasks consist of practicing the Musekeweya methodology by infusing psychological messages of healing, unity, and reconciliation, as well as sustainable peace into the radio drama to promote unity in Rwanda. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Andre.
Thank you so much.
And moving over just a little bit in Africa, we're going to Uganda. We have Carl Ed Alega. He is an experienced Ugandan media producer and advertising professional, a lecturer at, is it Makerere? Could you say the name?
It's Makerere University.
Makerere University. He teaches transmedia storytelling techniques to empower young people to take civic action. Through the creation of a Ugandan television series, he embeds education messages into entertainment to increase civic participation among Ugandans. I want to welcome our panelists. All of us are joining from different times and from different parts of the world, and it's great to have you all here to engage this really important conversation. And I want to start the conversation by letting the audience know that we're going to be doing a number of activities and having some interaction. And so we encourage you to use the chat. We'll be doing a question and answer session, but feel free to send in questions throughout the course of the event. I'll be going through those questions and we'll raise those for our panelists. And we'll be doing some activities around the feelings that words create for us and how they lead to disinformation. But I want to start by kind of establishing a framework for us to really understand disinformation, propaganda, etc. Raquel, we're going to bring up an image here of some of those definitions. Could you tell us a little bit about these varying definitions of mis, dis, and malinformation?
Yeah, thanks. So we look at disinformation and we actually distinguish it from misinformation. And First Draft has this lovely graphic here where we look at the two aspects. The first being if the information is true or not, and the second being what the intent of the information is. So I could say to you, good morning, it's Thursday, and I'm misinforming you, it's not Thursday, but I'm not intending to harm you. So we would just say it's misinformation. Disinformation is right in the middle. So disinformation is content that is deliberately created to misinform people. So there's intent behind it. And propaganda can fall into this category of disinformation if it's fabricated or manipulated content, but we don't say that all propaganda is disinformation, for example. But propaganda is typically like selected or curated pieces of information. And then malinformation is actually true information that's being shared with the intent to harm. So this would be if sharing some private information about someone would put them in danger. One example of this is doxing, when people's phone number is shared publicly and then they're bombarded with messages and calls from those who are attempting to sometimes silence or harm them.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think one of the reasons I think this is so important to start the conversation with is generally when we think of or we hear the word propaganda, we automatically assume that there's negative intent behind that information. And that may not always be the case. And I think, Mr. Andre, I know that there was some propaganda in Rwanda in the lead up to the events of 1994 that was specifically used to harm, but you've since created messaging that kind of works to counter some of that. I'm wondering if for the audience, you could just provide our audience a bit more context about the situation in Rwanda and about Musekeweya in general, so they get a better idea of the work that you're doing to use propaganda in a good way to promote unity and peace.
Thank you. Maybe I need to tell you that during genocide in Rwanda, there was a large propaganda through the media, and especially through radio RTLM, Radio Télévision Libre de Mille Collines, and it had effect because a radio normally is used by officials to disseminate instructions and regulations and several statements. And from that, what is said from the radio is considered by the population as the truth, and it can influence negatively. So there was this propaganda which resulted in the genocide that took more than 1 million lives of Tutsi group. And yeah, we consider that period of horrendous genocide as kind of darkness. And now we've created Musekeweya, meaning new dawn, in order to bring hope within the minds of Rwandese people. So we use the media to counteract what was destroyed by the media.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that it creates this kind of precarious line between, when we look at propaganda in terms of what is positive messaging and what is harmful messaging, and how are we balancing that line. But I think it also points to, Mr. Andre, the ways that the tools that were used to divide communities can equally be used to bring communities together as well. I want to turn quickly to Carl. Carl, could you tell us a little bit about your, with Film 256 and some other projects you're working on, a lot of the work that you're doing is working to embed messages into entertainment to increase civic action. And I wonder if you could also provide our audience a bit of context about Uganda and the recent events in Uganda and some of the reasons why civic participation is so important, especially given the number of young people who are part of the population there.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm glad to be here. So basically, a little bit about Uganda. Uganda is a country that got its independence in 1962. Now, after the independence, we got into a lot of turmoil. Probably you've heard of the former president Idi Amin, and there was a lot of stuff happening. Now, there came a savior in 1986. And this savior was supposed to change the political arena in Uganda. And one of the things he said, if I remember very well, was that the problem of Africa is leaders staying long in Africa. It's holding on to power for long in Africa.
Right.
Now, when you fast forward, 35 years later, he is still the president of the country. And which has made that the people who are in power, actually, most of them are above 65. Yet Uganda is one of the youngest populations in the world, if not the youngest. 78% of the Ugandans are under the age of 35. So you have this very big population of young people being led by a few.
Right.
Who the young believe are kind of like out of touch with what is going on right now. It gave emergence to a young man by the names of, who was formerly a musician, a personal friend to me. He came up and said, you know what, I'm going to contest and try and question the status quo. Because I feel like the people who are leading us have no idea. They've stayed so long in power with so many issues, but nothing is happening. So I need to stand up. So he came and contested. You probably have heard of him. He's called Robert Chagulanyi, popularly known as Bobby Wine.
Right.
So when he comes up, one of the main statements he made was, we have 20th century leaders trying to lead us into the 21st century. They don't have the technical know-how of how things are operating right now. What a saga in the parliament where they bought for the parliamentarians iPads and they did not know how to use iPads. You see, so there's a lot of disconnect between the people, the majority of Ugandans right now, and the people supposed to lead them. So there's a lot of friction, a lot of issues going on whereby the young people feel like, hey, we need to have a say in our own affairs. You see, so that's why we felt like we needed to be the voice. We needed to be the voice of change, the voice that comes and says, hey, these people actually, the young people are capable of leading, they're capable of making decisions, the right decisions for themselves, other than saying, you know what, they don't have any ideology, they're young, but they are, you know, they don't have anything to offer this country, which is very wrong. So that is why we came up with a program, trying to embed our messages, even in the trainings. Most of our trainings have themes, and these themes have particular messaging we're trying to convey in that particular area, because Uganda is very, very diverse. We have very many ethnic groups, and in terms of behaviors, they have culture and tradition dictate behaviors in these societies. So you have to be aware of these things in order for you to communicate to them effectively. So for many of our trainings, like when we went up to North to train, we knew that it was conflict resolution. We got a theme of conflict resolution because Northern Uganda has been torn apart with a lot of wars. So we knew that we needed to get a theme that they can relate with, that can spread positivity within that region. Then when we went to the West, of course, there is issue of accountability and corruption. So we taught them the skills of how to tell the stories best and how to identify true leaders who are not going to embezzle money, who are not going to. So the theme was totally different there. And then in the East, it was mainly about, we have a very big issue of street children in Eastern Uganda. So it was also trying to address, so we identify particular issues in our trainings and try and try to bring out those issues in the particular short films they'll make, maybe short plays or short dramas, so that people are made aware of the situation and they can act upon it.
Thank you for providing the audience with some of that context, and particularly talking about the very different challenges and issues that are faced by different regions in Rwanda, or excuse me, in Uganda. And there's a couple of things that I want to pull from and move to you, Raquel. One is, Mr. Andre speaks a bit of Musekeweya countering the media with media and really meeting the audience where they are, which is on the radio, with the primary people primarily getting their information from radio. And Carl is really talking about the kind of technological revolution and the way that we're getting more information from technology and from social media and from other sites, as opposed to, official kind of narratives. And so I know that in the United States in particular, digital media has really been used to spread disinformation. And so I'm wondering if you could, Raquel, talk a little bit about the challenges of this new kind of medium and some of the ways that your organization is working to provide people the skills that they need to be able to critically engage that kind of content.
Sure. Thanks. So my organization, IREX, has a program called Learn to Discern. And it zooms in on the individual. So we want our participants to, if they're listening to the radio or if they're in a specific context, have that resonate with them and feel like they have control over their media environment. So one of the challenges that we're facing now in the US and around the world is it's really easy to believe misinformation and disinformation. It's created in a way that our human brains, our psychology reacts to it and immediately says it makes us susceptible to it. We want to share it. We want to, believe it. So that's a big challenge. And one of the ways that our program tries to overcome that is to, focus on the individual, have people self-reflect on what media they're consuming, what are the different mediums that they're engaged with, and how they can discern if that information is, good information or not, and even if they need to discern if that information is good or not, right? We can't possibly fact check everything that we're intaking at this point. So right. Having that skill to critically think, okay, is this something I should check before I share it? Is this something that's making me feel a certain way? And maybe there's a reason why, and I should look into it.
So that's interesting, and we're actually gonna do an activity that engages that, the way that certain information feels us a particular way. But before we do that, one thing that you touched on that I want to return to Mr. Andre about is that you mentioned that it's in our psychology to respond to this information in ways that make us want to share and kind of get fired up. And I know that with Musekeweya, Mr. Andre, the methodology that you all use to communicate messages of unity in the radio drama is based in psychology. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the psychology behind the messaging and then how that finds its way into the program.
Yeah. Actually, we've in Musekeweya radio drama, we've created characters. Let me tell you that Musekeweya is a fiction, by the way. So we've created characters, and we use them. We use the dialogues between them to spread the messages, to disseminate the messages to our listeners.
So can you talk a little bit about in creating these fictional characters? I know that you have kind of three, I think you talk about the three different types of characters. that you incorporate into the show. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have three types of characters. We have negative characters, and these negative characters, I mean, they highlight the evil that is done. Yeah, and we have also positive characters who are there to counteract these negative characters in their dialogues. And also we have transitional characters, and these transitional, the role of these transitional characters is to, I mean, we make them change through the time, and so they follow a certain trajectory, and through their change, our listeners do follow them, because Musekeweya is about is about role models. So the listeners identify themselves with these positive characters, negative characters, and transitional characters. So when a transitional character at the beginning, the tendency is negative, and when they change through the trajectory, our listeners do change as well by identifying themselves with these changing characters. Yeah.
That's, and can you, I know that the whole process you go through in writing the scripts, there are a lot of people involved in writing it. Is that correct? Could you talk a little bit about the number of people who are involved in making sure that these messages speak to the themes of unity and reconciliation that you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, the whole process starts with a seminar that brings together different partners in the field of peace building in Rwanda, and also La Benevolencia agents. La Benevolencia is the NGO that produces the Musekeweya, and also the script writers are there, and we have also in that seminar, we have also a psychologist, member of what is called academic, to check how we are inserting properly the psychological messages in Musekeweya. So this seminar, the role of this seminar is to create what is called a storyline, and a storyline is like the Bible of the script writers. And when we have this storyline, the following step is to develop synopsis. Those are a summary of what of the scenes that are going to be developed in episodes.
Right, right.
And after we develop the synopsis, then the script writers start writing, and also in that seminar, we collect information about the socio-political situation all over the country, and this helps us choose a sequence of messages that are accurate to be put in the episodes to be developed. And every every month we develop a series of 5 episodes, and the process is ended by a recording of audio to be aired on radios.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to, I know it's, you know, I think a lot of our audience, when they think of, you know, script writers for television shows and for radio, you know, they think of just a group of writers. And what I appreciate about the work that Musekeweya is doing is that it's bringing together academics and writers and all sorts of people who are really working to carefully craft the messages so that they get consumed in a particular way, or that they evoke a particular feeling. And so I want to go to our activity, and I encourage the audience to play along in the chat. Raquel will introduce it. And if I could get my tech support in the back to put up the activity, that would be great. Do you want to say a little bit about what we're going to do, Raquel, and then we'll jump right in?
Yeah, thanks. So since we are at Planet Word, I thought it's fitting to play a little word game. What we have here is a wheel of emotions. So what we'll do is we'll have on the slide a word or a few words, and it's your task to react. So what emotion does that word make you feel? And this wheel is just to sort of help get you thinking about different kinds of emotions. So we have joy, we have anger, we have sadness, surprise, trust. You are not limited to feeling what's on this wheel in any way. And yeah, so maybe we can get in the chat some reactions. Are we ready? I think you can't do emojis, but maybe we can get like an exclamation point if you're ready to start.
Yeah, let's start.
All right.
Woohoo!
Excellent. Okay, so the first word, we'll go to the next slide. Winter. So what do you feel when you see this word? Cold, sad, empty, tired, dreary, sadness, yeah, snow,
Oh, beauty.
beauty, curious, apathetic, frigid, bright, happy. Yeah, lots of great emotions here.
Sleepy. I understand that one for sure. And
Yeah, limitless,
Wow.
dreary. Yeah, these are great. Resistance, dark. Excellent.
So Raquel, I noticed, and you'll probably talk a bit more about this, but outside of a couple of words, a lot of the emotions that people were feeling here were sadness, depression, loneliness, dreariness, sleepiness. So I'm wondering what that means for like how we might then encounter this word in a form of media.
Yeah, so we do this exercise or activity mostly for recognition and awareness. So the idea is that if we're encountering words and headlines every day, and they're making us feel things and we might not be aware of it. And if you're not aware, for example, if you're in, this might not be the most powerful word, but if something evokes really strong emotions and you're in like fight or flight mode, it's really hard to think critically and make critical decisions. So knowing that that is what happens in our brains when we see certain words or images, we can be able to pause and take that step back to sort of regulate and think critically about just the information that's there. And yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting to consider the way that, I think with certain words, we definitely, we with certain words, we
Mm.
kind of automatically understand that it evokes emotion.
Mhm.
I think a word as simple as winter, we don't necessarily pay close attention
Right.
to the way that creates a particular feeling in us. And I'm interested if we could go to one of the headlines, the way that this might occur in an everyday, article or something that we read. So I'll let you
Yep.
take it from here.
Yeah, so here's a headline for you all. So the headline is "Pandemic Sets Back Women's Progress in Workforce." So it'd be great to see what you feel in the chat. And I saw also in the chat, there's this great point that connecting in a second or third language is less effective. So that's true that, you might be affected more strongly by words that are in your native language. So
Interesting.
apologies to those participating who native language might not be English. Maybe you don't feel so strongly about these words. We're getting some good reactions though. So there's angry, sorry, sad, disappointed, frustrated, worried, curious, aggravated, fury, irritated, frustrated, truth, concerned, belittled, determination, resentful. Yeah, so these are pretty strong. Yeah, you don't trust it, untrust.
Yeah, this is
strong emotions from what might be considered a pretty objective headline, right?
Yeah, it's interesting to see all of the emotional reactions to this. And like you said, because it's supposed to be a seemingly objective headline, but because I'm in a critical mindset now, as I'm looking at it, I'm seeing pandemic sets back women's progress in workforce. It makes the reader believe that just the pandemic has limited women's ability to move forward in the workplace, and it kind of pulls that out of a larger context of the reasons why women might be particularly impacted by the pandemic itself and the related economic fallout from it.
Great.
That's great. Thank you everyone for participating. It was great to see all of your words come in, and I hope that as you start to read headlines or encounter different information, that you do this step of stopping to really think about how it makes you feel, so that you can then really engage it more critically in terms of, well, then what is your reaction as a result of that? Raquel, that was really fascinating and fun to watch.
Thanks everyone for participating.
In about 5 to 10 minutes, we'll move into a question and answer. So I encourage everybody attending to, if you have questions for our panelists, please go ahead and put them in the chat. But I want to return to you, Carl. Mr. Andre was talking a bit about the ways that they're using psychology in these character tropes as a way of communicating messages. And you also do similar things. I'm wondering if you could talk about the way that you use storytelling to embed messages into the media that you're creating. Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're here. You're here. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, yes. Well, before we went for the program of storytelling for social impact, most times, most of the messages were embedded in, of course, there's the mainstream media that everyone watches TV, everyone listens, and everyone reads newspapers. But then there was an emergence of music as a way of communicating. So popular music started growing, and then it's through, culturally, people used to say a lot through music. Like in Ugandan culture, drums, like every time people wanted to communicate, they would use drums. Drums was very symbolic to communicate something, yeah? So before that, people started talking over the drums. So whatever you had wanted to say, maybe you want to get back at someone who has done something wrong to you, you'd put it in a song, yeah? And compose a song about it and sing it in the open. But now the affected person will feel like, oh, this person is saying so and so about me. Then they'll react. So that culture became so popular even amongst the popular musicians. One of them being the presidential aspirant right now. They started, using music to get back at each other. But then at the same time, it's also a way that the government and the NGO fraternity started using music to communicate to people. Yeah, so they would embed messages or compose music because music was more acceptable by very many people. Anyone can access it. Yeah, so they started embedding music in, messages in there until TV came into play. So we started doing dramas with messages still embedded, whichever message you wanted to put out there, and also your target, because your target audience, who you're targeting matters. Like I said, the different demographics and how you put the message in there matters. So, and then until social media came into play. Now everyone gets their information on social media, in Kampala especially. So you find that someone will not watch news, will not read any newspapers, but they'll know what's going on because they got the information of social media. So now for this program, we learned something called transmedia as a means of disseminating information. That means you can get one message and package it in different forms for the different media formats and still put out the same message, yeah, for a target audience. And that's why we also learned that there is always what we call the ideal user, the mid-level user, and the mischance. So ideal user is actually the person who's going to get this information, get excited, share it, talk about it with friends and things like that. A mid-level user is the person who will get the information, be interested, talk about it to a few people, but not as much as the ideal user. Then the mischance is someone who gets the information, but it does not resonate with them.
Right.
So they tend to ignore. So you look at those formats and then know how best to put in your information regardless, but using transmedia. And we learned that entertainment education is very effective because people, while they're being entertained, if you're passing on information, it's more effective because then they're in euphoria. They're in a certain level where their minds are receptive. They are enjoying the moment. So if you put in information there, then that information is bound to stick compared to someone who is passive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, embedding messages into entertainment, I think also speaks to the ways in which social media, because it gives us that same sort of euphoric feeling, it's why that particular medium has been so effective in spreading misinformation. We have a question here from Sharon and Rebecca, Raquel, I think that you might be, I think all of you can answer, but I'll go to you first, Raquel. It's a really good question. How effective is repetition? That is repeating the same disinformation or misinformation in influencing media consumers? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I don't have specific stats or research on it, but I can sort of make an informed guess at what happens, which I think all of us maybe can sort of assume the more you see something, the more you might believe it. In a way, I think one thing for fact checking, we often tell people or encourage people to cross-check their information. So we say, look for this somewhere else. If you think it might be false, or one of the first things you can do is see if anyone else has published it. So I think if there is a message that is being published in a lot of different mediums and different ways, and it's coming at people in different ways, it would be pretty easy to be susceptible to that message and harder to check.
Yeah, and I think this speaks back to what Carl was just talking about in terms of transmedia and really communicating across multiple platforms in order to convey a message. Mr. Andre, I'm wondering the same question for you. Do you, in Musekeweya, do you kind of engage in repetition? Are you kind of communicating the same message over and over again? Is that one of the strategies that you use?
Yeah, we repeat the message. Of course, every message is subdivided into components. and we do repeat messages, cause yeah, when it is repeated, it is memorized, it is consumed kind of. But also someone may may not be able to follow one episode of Musekeweya today, but next time when we repeat the same message, that one can now follow and catch the message. So we do repeat the messages as well.
Great. And Carl, same question for you. I'm wondering, in the work that you're producing, are you using repetition or I guess how are you communicating the same message across multiple channels as a way to repeat that and promote social and have a social impact?
Of course, yeah, when we repeat it, we repeat it, but in a different story.
Got it.
Right. So we are not, putting the same episode as last time, but we use a new episode. We use a new story to repeat the message.
Right, got it. And Carl, how about you in the work that you do?
Yes, repetition is kind of like creates consistency. Like if someone missed the message the first time, they actually get it the second time. But sometimes, if again you over repeat without changing the context of what you're repeating, like in terms of packaging, then it becomes monotonous and someone might become disinterested. So maybe we can repeat it like 2, 3, 4 times, and then we find another way in which to communicate the same message that is more interesting to the listener or viewer.
Got it. That's interesting that it becomes, something can become too repetitive. And I think this connects back to what Mr. Andre was saying about the changing of the packaging and making sure that we communicate the same message, but in new and interesting ways. We have another question that came in, and I think this is leading us to kind of wrapping up a bit, but what are the most common, and Raquel, maybe you can take this, but what are the most common tools we can keep an eye out for in order to spot mis or disinformation?
Yeah, it's a great question and a tough question. It doesn't always look the same, right? And part of it is, I mean, knowing the context that you're in and knowing who you can trust, which media you're engaging with. So I would say from the learn to discern perspective, a really big thing is this emotional piece. So watching out for things that really trigger an emotional reaction. And when you have that reaction, being able to recognize it and take a step back and ask, okay, who created this message? Why might they have wanted me to feel this way? What's behind it? What do I need to learn more about it to, be able to act on this information in an informed manner? And I would really encourage sort of taking stock and reflecting on your media, that trust aspect. Do you trust the media that you're engaging with? And do you feel in control of your media consumption and habits? And if not, what can you do to change that?
We have a really great question that just came in, and I want, if all three of you could answer. I think this speaks to kind of what we talked about at the top of the hour, that not all propaganda is negative or has negative intent. And I think both Musekeweya and Carl, the work that you're doing with Film 256, you're both trying to create positive messages. But Bryant wants to know, do you think there can be unintended consequences even to propaganda with positive intent? What do we need to be careful of? So this is a big question, but Carl, we'll start with you if you don't mind. Is there, what are some of the are there unintended consequences to even putting positive messaging, and how can we still be critical in the way that we consume something so that we're careful of or when we're producing those things, so that we can be careful of not engaging unintended consequences?
Yes, I think, yes, sometimes you get a reaction of from something that you didn't intend it to be a certain way. Yes, that does happen a lot, especially if there was a problem in strategy or in the way you communicated or the wording of your communication. This takes me back to what Raquel said. Sometimes you need to do a check. Like, when you hear this information, how does it make you feel? So upon what you feel is, you're going to start asking yourself a question: is it a good thing or a bad thing? So before I actually react, besides the way I feel, should I cross-check this information and see if it is actually correct, or it's from the right source, or I'm supposed to act upon it? You can ask yourself those questions. Then that will actually help stop yourself from reacting negatively or having a negative consequence for a positively intended information that is out there. So yes, it does happen a lot, especially like today I speak in the context of Uganda. Like, sometimes they put out the information out there thinking that it's going to help people ABCD. Like, for example, the pandemic, they're saying follow the SOPs, but things surrounding, again, the people who are putting out the information, people are receiving it negatively. People are saying, no, there's too much corruption. You people just want to eat money. You just want to do this. You just want to do this because you people are known for doing that. Right. Yet, all they're trying to say is, guys, take care, put on masks, do social distancing, follow all the SOPs. But now the recipients are saying, no, you're putting out this information because you are looking for ways in which you can steal money. So yes, it does happen.
Yeah, a couple of things. All of you have spoken very, very specifically about the context and the audience, and being able to really understand your audience when you're communicating a message. And then from the consumer side, really understanding yourself as the way you're reacting to those messages. There's a couple of other good questions here that I'd like to get to. One is from Marcus. Do you believe that propaganda is more or less effective at influencing youth culture than it was, let's say, at the beginning of the 20th century? When we think about the propaganda that was used across Nazi Germany, that was really effective propaganda. And so I'm wondering, we have all these new tools and we have more information at our fingertips than ever before to cross-check information. But is that helping? Raquel, do you have any stats on this in the work that you do around the world?
It's a good question. It's a big question. More or less effective? I'm not sure we can say. I think it's effective in a different way. Sort of like you were saying, where our information space looks really different today than it did at the beginning of the 20th century. So people didn't have, smartphones or TikTok at the beginning of the 20th century. But I think that it sort of I want to go back to this like psychology idea that the way our brains are built is, more or less the same, right? So we are still susceptible to certain messaging, depending on who we are and what context we're living in, and we are going to respond to that and react to that. So I think, I hope that answers the question. So change the question, but
I think it does. I think two of the key points are, one, our brains are still wired the same way, so we're likely to be as influenced as others were in history. But two, I think it also speaks to this idea of, and Carl, you mentioned this as well, of trust. And really trying to figure out who we trust. And that's a difficult thing for us for us to discern, because we often, the folks that we trust when we're growing up may then ultimately not be trustworthy. And so I'm wondering for you, Mr. Andre, Musekeweya has gotten a lot of international attention because it's become this trusted program that people watch, or excuse me, listen to. And I'm wondering, how have you effectively built your audience to engage this messaging?
Yeah, we make sure that we create very interesting stories, and these stories are used, to disseminate the messages. We have many stories in Musekeweya. We have a story about youth. We have a story about conflict, and yeah, and we make sure there's always something interesting in these stories, and the listeners are attracted by one or another, but they end up by consuming the messages in there. Yeah, that's how we make sure we create very interesting stories, and then we put messages in there.
Yeah, again, speaking to context and meeting an audience where they are. We're coming down to our last.
Meeting them.
Right.
Sorry, we do meet them on field, and not only that, but also we give them a telephone line whereby they can send their comments and their feedbacks. We have also a website whereby they can send their feedbacks. So we keep in touch with them, and there's a kind of interaction.
Yeah, the interacting and really knowing your audience so that you can provide the messages that are going to be most effective. We're coming now down to our last few minutes, and as we wrap things up, Julia just submitted a comment, and I think it's a really good one that I'd like to share with everybody. Julia says, "I think the effectiveness of propaganda is a double-edged sword. The internet gives access to more information, but not all information is equal. There is a lot more information that masquerades as real. Deep fakes, bad scholarship, repeating the same bad or incomplete statistics. The internet makes it much easier for bad information not to die. Think about Facebook messages that from the early 2000s are still circulating and getting passed along." And so as we close the conversation today, Raquel, I want to bring it back to our definitions at the front. Where can people learn more about being critical media consumers? And if there was kind of one thing you'd want our attendees to take away as a tool in their toolbox, what would that be?
Yeah, thanks. It's a really good point, and I think understanding how the internet works and how the messages we receive, these messages. We talk sometimes about like filter bubbles, for instance, where the internet works now today to give you messages that it thinks you want to see and just reinforce what you already know or think. And I think that really what I would like people to take away is that they can take an active role in this as not just a consumer, but someone who's participating and engaging with the media, and that by sort of being able to knowing these strategies and being able to recognize these things will help people be able to make more objective and critical decisions and questions. And I think, yeah, everyone has their role to play, and can figure out what that is for themselves. It might look different for every person.
Thank you for that. And I think everybody has their role to play around the world. And so it's been nice to get multiple perspectives from different contexts and really think about the way that each of those contexts requires messages to be communicated in certain ways, but all of us can use some of these tools to critically examine the messages that we've consumed. I want to thank all of you for, I want to thank our attendees for joining us, and I want to especially thank our panelists today for a really thought-provoking conversation about the impact of language and how it influences us. I encourage everyone attending to please check out more information on each of our panelists. There was a beautiful podcast by Hidden Brain that was all about Musekeweya, and it'll give you some additional context and really breaks down some of the psychology that Mr. Andre was talking about today. Carl, is it Skyrocket, your YouTube channel?
Skyrock.
And what's the whole thing? Skyrock
Production.
Skyrock Productions. Mr. Carl has a YouTube channel. I encourage you to check out those things. And then Raquel, is there a way for folks to access some of the tools? I know we had a comment that came in earlier that was
Yes.
From a teacher about middle school curriculum. Is there a place where they can access some of this?
Yes, the link that Shared Studio is actually put in the chat at the beginning, and I don't know if you'll share it again, but the link to the Learn to Discern page on our website has a link to our full curriculum in English. So you can find the US version of our curriculum there. And I believe you can also find links there to some of our online versions of this training, which are, we have a very verified online course. It's targeted for Ukrainians, but it's in English if anyone wants to check that out too. So.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you again to our panelists for a really incredible conversation. I wish everybody a wonderful day and a wonderful week ahead. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.